You know, I actually did plan to have some Sonic stuff on the desk for the video, but this little prima donna doesn't want anything else on the camera but him. So when I first started working on this video, the title was something like How Scrapnik Island Made Me a Fan of the Sonic franchise again, but that's kind of not the truth. I've always been a fan of the Sonic franchise, it's just the games that I've had trouble getting behind lately. Let's see if this story sounds familiar. Growing up, one of the most memorable games in the Sonic series for me was Sonic 3 and Knuckles, especially the final stages and the bosses in them. Super Sonic flying through space to chase down an escaping Eggman was such a high point that ever since then, Sega's been trying to emulate it in following games, to the point of making Super Sonic pretty much just a predictable story beat for the climax instead of being a reward for you playing the game. And like many other Sonic fans, I grew distant from the series after Sonic 06 and Sonic Unleashed. However, I still had hope that there were still good games and surprises out there. After all, I think Sonic Rush is one of the best games in the series, and it definitely needs some kind of re-release on a non-DS platform. Now, I kept hearing the comics were good in terms of story and characters, and generally I believed it because I was a big fan of the Sonic Saturday morning cartoon, and knew that there was a ton of potential to be had. I just really never went out of my way to read any until after I found out recently that, well, one of my favorite characters from Sonic 3 and Knuckles was in the Scrapnik Island miniseries by IDW. That character was Mecha Sonic. Mecha Sonic was a recurring boss both Sonic and Knuckles dealt with in the game, and to me one of the most awesome moments in the series is when Knuckles has to fight not just Mecha Sonic as a boss, but also Mecha Sonic empowered by the Master Emerald to become Super Mecha Sonic. Now, regardless of who was fighting Mecha Sonic in the game, I was very impressed by those parts, and I still love replaying those boss fights to this day. So with those kinds of memories, knowing Mecha Sonic had a starring role was enough to make me hunt down and order the miniseries. Suckering me into the comic using a nostalgia trip like this wound up giving me not just a great Sonic story, but just a good story in general. And that actually came from new explorations of characters that I wouldn't have expected or predicted. So, what happens in the comic that makes me like it so much? First off, while I was a fan growing up of the Saturday morning Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, I never gave myself time to actually read through many of the comics. And that would include, relevant to this video, the rest of the IDW comics. However, the comic is written so that you don't need to know what's going on in the world, the setting, or anything else in any of the comics. However, you do kind of need to understand how things went down in Sonic and Knuckles for a bit of the full effect. But we'll get to that, and they do sort of show it in the comic. Now, before I get too far along, I just want to say that this is something that you should check out yourself. It's a great story and well worth supporting the creators of it with the $15 price tag for the collected edition like I have, or slightly more for the individual comics. There's also things in this video that I'm not focusing on or going to be glossing over or kind of speeding through, so to speak. And it's definitely full of things that you should take it at your own pace and find the little things in it that you like yourself. Scrapnik Island itself turns out to be the wreckage of the original Death Egg from Sonic 2, 3, and Sonic & Knuckles. Found in the middle of the ocean where Sonic and Tails crash land after a storm takes out the plane. Sonic wakes up with an injured foot inside a metal cast and explores the dark corridors trying to find Tails. Instead, he winds up having to run and hide from a bunch of robots. Chief among them, a damaged but active Mecha Sonic. And some old Sonic fans will probably notice what he's hiding in here. The chase is ended when Sonic bumps into an E-Series robot named Sigma, along with Tails. Turns out the so-called Scrapniks are peaceful, and are looking to not just help repair Sonic and Tails' plane, but also find a way to repair another leftover ship of Eggman's so that they can escape the island as well. And this is the first moment I actually found myself taking notice and enjoying the story and the writing. Left to their own devices, without Eggman's control and influence, the robots he built to take over the world decided to live free and peaceful lives when given the chance to be on their own. Even if they have to do it as rusted husks held together with spare parts and pin their hopes on literal piles of junk. Sigma wound up finding and repairing, to the best of his abilities, nearly all the robots on the island, including Mecha Sonic. In fact, Mecha Sonic is stated to have a dream of planting a sunflower he discovered in real soil after they get free of the island. However, Mecha Sonic also seems to be having issues with his programming, but is still able to keep it under control while escorting Sonic and Sigma as they go searching for a part the plane needs. Now, at this point, I was expecting a story where Mecha is clearly glitching out with his programming and will eventually fight Sonic again in a big awesome grudge match of the century kind of thing. It seems to be the predictable thing that they're building up to and hinting at, but there's actually a couple things otherwise that are a bit more important when leading into Mecha Sonic's eventual issues. First off, Sonic actually tries to bury the hatchet with Mecha over what happened in the past, realizing that he seems honest in his desire to be peaceful, protect the others, and want to start a hobby in gardening. I'll discuss this more later, but knowing Sonic is the all-loving, help everybody and have adventures type of hero is something that makes the cynical parts of me keep forgetting that the best portrayals of that kind of character include empathy. It's easier to believe and trust a character as a good guy when they show actual virtues like that, acting on their beliefs that keep them on the path of a hero instead of just constantly suggesting it or saying it's a thing without ever having to prove it. In this case, we've seen Sonic actually given the side-eye to Mecha a bunch of times until this point, so this is something he actually thought about before doing it instead of just saying, "I'm the good guy, I forgive you." And speaking of showing and not just telling, Mecha Sonic winds up getting the focus for a bit. In fact, I think it's fairly obvious that as the miniseries goes forward, Mecha Sonic is actually the main character, with Sonic and Tails being used as a way to help tell his story. Now, like I said before, I was expecting these glitches to eventually lead to Mecha Sonic turning evil again and turning against everybody, attacking Sonic. That's not exactly what happens. We're about to see there's something deeper involved than that. Another robotic duplicate known as Mecha Knuckles gets the drop on the two, and Mecha Sonic actually focuses on protecting Sonic and getting away, most likely to prevent a confrontation with a fellow Scrapnik. Mecha Sonic has a duty as a protector towards Sonic and the Scrapniks, and by God, he's gonna do it. And by the way, Mecha Knuckles is from the games as well, specifically a boss fight on Sonic Advance. However, the comic kind of explains in 2 sentences all that's needed to know about him. Trust me, I tried looking up stuff about this character and there really wasn't much I could find beyond what Sigma says in the comic. Sigma does continue, though, in saying that after he discovered Mecha Knuckles, he wasn't fully able to remove Eggman's programming. So instead, Sigma settled for changing the parameters of his protective instincts to be focused on the ship that the Scrapniks were building. And this sets up the fact that he also couldn't remove all the programming from Mecha Sonic as well. This leads to both of the mechas dueling, when Mecha Knuckles glitches and gets fully aggressive, knocking out Sigma and getting a good blow-in on Mecha Sonic. Now, there's a lot of good bits in this comic that I enjoy, but the results of that blow on Mecha Sonic and how it's presented to us, I feel is not just a standout moment in the comic, but also a pivotal one in giving character to a voiceless robot. And it really got me invested in the rest of the comic going forward. Put bluntly, Mecha Sonic suffers what I would describe as PTSD when the memories of his boss fights against Knuckles and Sonic come back, as well as visions of Eggman calling him his greatest creation to date. The flashbacks, combined with what I assume is his old programming coming back to the surface, cause him to go berserk over his feelings of failure and betrayal, and quickly put down Mecha Knuckles before kidnapping Sonic. And while Mecha Sonic can be expected to have perfect recording and memory of things because he's a robot, I find it actually hard to figure out whether Sonic actually did call him trash when he beat him, or if that's a delusion from Mecha Sonic on his part. With the personality and humanity that we've been getting glimpses of with these robots as a whole, it does raise the question about whether or not they actually are capable of, I don't know, paranoia and delusions or something like that. And to return to other characterizations, when the third issue opens, Sonic actually mentions how tired he is of getting backstabbed when he tries to give enemies a chance at mercy and forgiveness. Again, showing that he is aware of the risks he takes in trying to be a hero and doing the right thing, and does them anyway. Obviously, Mecha Sonic has plans for our hero, but one of the other robots spying on this goes to find help. Meanwhile, Sigma reawakens after reflecting on his memories of rescuing and rebuilding Mecha Sonic, showing that Mecha Sonic actually was truly happy to be free with the rest of them. And let's reflect on that and what I said earlier for a moment. The robots free of Eggman's influence are showing emotion, regardless of who or what they are. This has been hinted at in the games, at least the ones I've played, mostly with other E-Series robots like Sigma or the sidekick robots Orbot and Cubot. But this is the first I've seen clearly a possible sapience in the robots. And I know about the one character in Sonic Frontiers. I haven't played it yet, I haven't had experience with it yet, so I'm not sure how to react to that one just yet. Back to Tails, when the sneaky little robot tells him what's going on, he immediately gears up with his new robot pals, builds a gun, and... Okay, hold on a minute. Where was this Tails in the games? I am aware that I haven't played or looked too deep into the modern Sonic games since Sonic Unleashed. But outside of the Sonic Adventure games, I have very rarely, if ever, seen Tails depicted as anything other than Sonic's 5-year-old sidekick. I was honestly surprised to see that in the second Sonic movie they remembered that Tails was inventive and mechanical like this, and even the Lego sets show that. But for now, let's just put a pin in this because we'll revisit it later when I'm talking about the reasons why this comic impressed me so much and what it means for the greater Sonic franchise as a whole. We get a really effective sequence in the comic now where, as the team moves through the dark corridors, and yes, these are deliberate references to aliens here, they stumble upon Sigma, who fills them in on the fact that he couldn't fully get rid of Eggman's programming. And Mecha is acting in a corrupted state of mind that Sigma blames himself for. Now, up to this point in the comic, it was mentioned that the other robots, Sigma excluded, are silent because the only way their electronic form of communication between each other could be translated was if they were close enough for Tails' tablet to translate it into speech. So put yourself in the team's shoes when they hear Mecha Sonic responding to their conversation over the tablet, followed by 2 words nobody wants to hear in a dark, scary, cramped place. Behind you. The next 7 pages I really enjoyed. And while my experience with comics is and will always be limited, I think the sequences shown were very well done. There's panic shooting, allies getting picked off into the shadows one by one, the way Mecha always feels like he's advancing and getting closer from the edge of the shadows. Okay, look, from my side of things, I would never have thought, or even expected, half the stuff that they did in this comic as a whole. Scrapnik Island is one of those comics, or graphic novels, however you want to look at it, that makes you think and realize, aha! Comics are more than just pictures and word balloons. The sequence ends with Mecha Sonic discussing how it's eating him up inside, that Eggman left him to rot when he was supposed to be his greatest creation, and rewarded for being so with conquering the world at Eggman's side. Seemingly, he appears to want to get revenge on Eggman for getting dumped aside like that. But first he disposes of Tails down a garbage chute, and takes the tablet with him in order to begin his plans. He reveals to Sonic he plans to use an old, discarded invention of Eggman's to transfer his mind into Sonic's body. Doing so, he can use Sonic's speed to run across water and escape the island, and make sure, quote, the doctor never forgets me again. It's here that it becomes clear Mecha is actually forcing himself into doing this, trying to convince himself by speaking out loud that this is what he should do and that making friends was just a glitch. Or to put it another way, the robot is going along with it to stop programming headaches that are probably more than just painful for him to deal with. Like going along with the flow is preventing the equivalent of a robot aneurysm. I'll point out here, though, that in the physical copy of the miniseries that I have, there's a section in the back talking about how the artists were supposed to draw and use the presentation of Mecha's eyes to reflect his emotions and mental state. Majority red eyes, like we've been seeing, isn't just to show a menacing or frenzied state, but most crucially, it also shows he's in a self-destructive state of mind. And the body language helps show that at this point as well. When the switch is thrown, the robots that have been hiding nearby jump to action and distract Mecha enough for them to destroy the machine before the process is complete. This time he is enraged, and attacks his former friends in a berserk fury while Sonic is freed. Also, this is another deliberate reference, but now referencing the excellent online fan series Super Mario Bros. Z. And in finding the proof of this, I found an interesting post on Reddit about it that I'll discuss later. When Sonic gets back on his feet, the interrupted mind transfer actually left behind a mental link, allowing Sonic and Mecha to share their thoughts and emotions for the time being. The first thing Sonic feels from this link is Mecha's sadness and anger, and immediately gets to work drawing Mecha's attention from the other robots. During a running duel between the weakened and injured Sonics, Mecha keeps projecting his own personal spite at Sonic to keep fighting as their battle winds up in an active furnace. Sonic manages to push himself past his foot injury and get the drop on Mecha, kicking Mecha Sonic in the face hard enough to shatter the metal bracing around his foot and, almost literally, knocking sense back into the robot. Mecha reflects a bit on his failures both toward Eggman and his new friends, using it as an excuse to confirm himself as trash and reject Sonic's attempt to save him. Sonic tells him to knock off the pity party, and this honestly reminds me a bit of Sonic's character when he was dealing with Blaze in Sonic Rush a little bit, demanding Mecha take his hand after yelling at him to live for and make his own future in the ways Mecha was envying Sonic about earlier. Unfortunately, Sonic's foot didn't like all the new exercise and craps out on him. So they're both stuck as neither of them can move now as they slowly fall further into the furnace. Naturally, this is when Tails shows up in the nick of time, grabbing hold of them as a chain made of the rest of the robots work together to save both of their friends. I mean, I say naturally in a kind of dismissive manner, but honestly, after all Mecha went through and hiding his suffering and issues from the others, his friends should be the ones that come to save him. like rescuing him from the furnace is symbolic of rescuing him from his own self-destructive thoughts and actions. In fact, we're immediately shown that Mecha is once again happy to be with the friends he tried pushing away from him, and the last remnants of the mental link allow Mecha Sonic to cry tears of joy from Sonic's eyes. The comic ends with Tails removing the last of Eggman's programming from Mecha Knuckles and Mecha Sonic, so they can fully be free. And Sonic and Tails fly away as friends to all of the Scrapniks, as Mecha Sonic promises to live for tomorrow with help from his friends. So after reading this comic, two things occurred to me. First off, that was awesome! Secondly, as I said before, I became not really interested in the games that much anymore because of the games. But because of what Scrapnik Island has done, I find my interest in the games rekindled. And it's not like bad experiences with the games made me stop being a fan of Sonic. You're always a fan of what you enjoyed of something, and like I said at the beginning, the older games I'm still a fan of, and they still make me a fan of Sonic as a whole. But if I was trying to explain to people what I found interesting, what I thought was cool for them to check out in the Sonic franchise, the games sort of became not one of the things I would bring up. And quite frankly, I'll probably do a follow-up video with all this at some point in time, going through Sonic Forces, Sonic X Shadow Generations, and Sonic Frontiers, just to see whether or not there's still something interesting to see in them. And to be fair and clear, I'm not holding characters and story as the only metric that the Sonic franchise should be judged by, especially the video games. If the video games are fun to play, if they're interesting, if something about them feels unique or original, or if it just feels like they're trying something with them, then that's possibly enough. Maybe not enough for me to say that game should be played, but it's enough for me to still stick around and see what else they want to try. But going forward in the Sonic franchise, the characters are the things that I find myself gravitating toward keeping a focus on. I guess in a way, the issue I've been having with the Sonic games is that after playing 06 and Unleashed, it felt like they just didn't care anymore about what they were making, and that made it all the more easier for me, and presumably others, to not care about playing the games or seeing what was in them. And while some of the reasons I have might feel minor to other people, these are some of the reasons why I feel that way. I loved Sonic Rush and enjoyed the story between Sonic and Blaze in that game, and also thought the gameplay was really good. But outside of Sonic, every time I see side characters, especially Tails, it feels like they're in there just because people expect them to be, and the developers, or at least the people telling them what to do, don't care about actually treating them as characters. In Sonic Adventure, Tails stopped a ballistic missile from destroying a city, and then he was the one that beat Eggman in his final boss fight for his story. Quite frankly, he should be remembered and treated as much of a hero as Sonic is. And again, he might very well be in the stuff I haven't seen or played. And I might have hated the Mechwalker gameplay of Tails and Eggman in Sonic Adventure 2, but at least that gameplay helped us remember Tails was on par, if not a peer to, Eggman's mechanical and scientific skills. After those games, though, Tails never seemed to be presented, in my eyes, more than just the generic kid sidekick, and that includes in Sonic Rush. And if I'm wrong about this stuff, I'm pretty much going entirely off of memory here. If I didn't play it and I missed it, or I'm not remembering something in one of the games correctly, feel free to tell me and correct me. And in my view, the rest of the cast hasn't been treated much better, to the point I feel that it's either a mistake, an accident, or a miracle that Shadow came off as having some of the best character exploration in Sonic 06. Now, I have a suspicion that when I finally play Frontiers, I will enjoy it, at least somewhat, and like some of what the characters do in it. I know about Sage now, after all, and won't mind seeing how that all plays out for myself. As rough and negative and critical as all this sounds, I'm actually a positive person when it comes to giving games, movies, music, whatever, a fair chance. I want to give things that fair chance to impress me, or at least be decent. And the reason Scrapnik Island makes me a stronger fan of the Sonic franchise again is because it gives me a renewed hope at what the games can be like in the future going forward. Not just, hey, Sega has these great writers, they should use them to write the next game. Unlike previous publications of the comics like Archie and Fleetway, the IDW comics are considered canonical to the stories and settings of the video games, which means that going forward, Scrapnik Island and Mecha Sonic, as they've been presented to us, is something that exists in the background of the world of Sonic the Hedgehog. Mecha Sonic is shown to still be as capable a character as he was in Sonic and Knuckles. And now, he has goals and something to fight for and protect, just as much as Sonic does. I would love to see Sega come out with a Mecha Sonic game where he goes through the levels, helping forge a path to a new home for the Scrapniks while defending them against, say, Eggman and his forces trying to destroy the quote-unquote mistakes. And let's think for a moment about not that the characters are shallow, but the usage of the characters is shallow. If they weren't used as just props, blank slates, whatever, and just an amount of their characterization, either past or something that happens in the story itself that builds upon their characterization, if that gets used, then how does it influence the story itself? And to make the point, if I said Sonic the Hedgehog game story, just about all of you out there are expecting and predicting that for the modern Sonic games at least, the ending of the story would involve the Chaos Emeralds pretty much falling into everybody's lap, Sonic going super mode, and beating the villain in some sort of over-the-top battle. We all know that Sonic is the designated hero of the series. However, if the only way that Sonic is able to become the hero that defeats the villain is because the Chaos Emeralds empower him to, then what's the point of Sonic being the hero if it's the Chaos Emeralds that are the I win button? I mean, what if it was just some random homeless guy that found the stupid things? Chaos World Star! A big thank you to Appalachian Anarchy for letting me use their song Redneck Rebels for that bit, but even though I think I just accidentally created my own Sonic OC, the point, I think, is being made here about how the different characters can influence not just the story, but also the game itself. And to be fair, it's not like the developers of the games don't understand that. When you play a different character in the games, most of the time, if not all the time, a different character has different gameplay mechanics to use. How far they're utilized in the game and in what way is up and down on the scale all over the place, depending on the game. I mean, technically, in Sonic and Knuckles, playing as Knuckles makes the game his story and not Sonic's. Or all the times in Sonic Adventure that you were playing as different characters for their own stories that were going on. I know it's a risk to the bean counters and accountants at Sega to try to do something like that instead of being safe like all the other game developers out there. But as I've mentioned before in my videos, Sega has hired fan creators in the past to work on projects, so why not do that again? Coming back to this Reddit post about the "I'll crush you" quote being used, it shows how much the fans went wild over quoting one of the more popular Sonic fan projects. However, it's not just that, because one of the Reddit posters here mentions that the IDW team is full of actual Sonic fans that love making references like that, including to other properties and franchises. And that's where the point I want to make is, and why the comic was so good in my opinion. Not so much that they were fans of Sonic making the comic, but as fans, they want to welcome as many people as they can into enjoying the same thing they do, and show them why they enjoy it so much. And by having that chance to do that, not only do you get new fans, but those new fans and the old fans might stick around. In the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, Deadpool has a quote that I'll be referencing for a very long time because of what it means in this context. When Deadpool's talking about finding the Wolverine that they use in the movie, he says, quote, "He's actually wearing a costume like he's not embarrassed to be in a superhero movie for once." This comics team love what they're doing and what they're part of, and that comes across clear as day. You read this comic and you get a good sense of why people like Sonic and the other characters. And even if you're outsiders ignorant of the franchise, the weird animals and the busted up robots tell a good story here in general. When I'm reading this comic or I'm looking at other stuff that I do the videos on, I'm thinking to myself, can I predict what's going to happen? Is there something that I expect to happen? And most importantly, how would I have done things? And I would never have thought to use Mecha Sonic like they did in this comic. I would have done something similar to Super Mario Bros. Z, bringing him back somehow to have one more epic rematch of the century duel between Mecha Sonic and Sonic himself. Maybe Knuckles as well. While that would have probably shown why I like the boss battle so much, it wouldn't show why I like Sonic and the others as characters. Sonic isn't afraid to question and doubt the problems that come with being a goody-two-shoes hero, but still do it anyway, because his morals and desires drive him to. However, if the focus was just to show a big giant rematch fight, it would limit Sonic's abilities to show those qualities, if at all. Tails wouldn't show off as effectively why he's a trusted friend of Sonic and not simply a hanger-on sidekick, or repeatedly being able to show himself as capable in his own ways. Mecha Sonic and the other Scrapniks as a whole would never have been given a chance to show character development. I most likely would never have thought to bring in something like the Scrapniks. These are very inspired and interesting takes on what were previously something you just smashed for points in the games. I mean, they made me believe a robot could have legitimate PTSD flashbacks. I love Mecha Sonic even more now. Not just as an awesome and memorable boss fight, but as an awesome, memorable, and interesting character that I would love to see more of, and would love to see if he has successes going forward. I don't know when I'll have time or money for it, but I am really willing to not just give the games I haven't played yet a chance because of this, but also the rest of the IDW comics as well. I said in previous videos it felt like the fans of Sonic, like with Sonic Villains and Execution, were the ones that were better ambassadors for getting people interested in the official franchise stuff. With what I saw in this comic, I am very happy to say that in some ways the actual official Sonic stuff is still able to do the same. if Sega just lets themselves tap into the kind of creativity and ideas coming from a comic or a story like this, or even just remembers what the characters have been in the past and can be again in the future, we could see some really interesting stories and games, including, in my case, games I may have missed out on. And to give a very strong example of how fans help franchises, I would never have known about Scrapnik Island had I not made my video about Sonic Execution. When I was working on my videos about Sonic Execution, one of their projects was the Starved comic, which featured the character of Sage. Now I know now she's a character in Sonic Frontiers, and she sounds like a very interesting character in Sonic Frontiers, even though I haven't played it yet. However, at the time, I did not know where she came from, so I went on the Sonic wikis and I looked through character lists, and after I found out where she was, I said, I'm bored. Waste time on a wiki. Let's see Mecha Sonic, right? Because I still like Mecha Sonic. Click on Mecha Sonic, there it is. Stars in Scrapnik Island. And I just had to see that for myself. So, thank you, the Sonic Execution team, for getting me to find out that this incredibly good comic existed. More or less, this is just another example of why the official creators and owners of stuff should be respectful toward the fans that they have, and more or less never take them for granted. So again, a thank you to Appalachian Anarchy for letting me use their music. Check them out. A big thank you to IDW for just making this comic and showing that there's still plenty of ideas and interesting things that can be done in the Sonic franchise. And I definitely look forward to whatever else I can get my hands on in the Sonic Comics franchises, or anything in the games that I now have more interest in playing. And for those of you out there, new and old, visiting this channel, watching this video, if I've earned your subscription, your like, whatever, please support these people that I've talked about first. I want whatever click you give me to be the second click after them. Be it the inspiration to make your own works, or the inspiration to put up with a bad day at work or school and so that you can come home and smile at something that they did. That inspiration and their creations won't be there without the support that you can give them. Take care, everybody. Oh, now you get down at the end, huh?